I've been really lucky throughout my career to have had some amazing mentors in the business world.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
Hi there, welcome to a special edition of Island Influencers. Can you believe it? We've hit the incredible milestone of our 100th episode, and I couldn't be more thrilled to share this occasion with all of you. From its very humble beginnings, born during the challenging time of the pandemic, the Island Influencers podcast has grown and flourished, and it's all thanks to the unwavering support of our remarkable Island Influencers and the fantastic Isle of Man community who support it. A heartfelt thank you to each of you who's been part of this project. As we celebrate this milestone, I'm going to step out of my usual role as the host. Yep, that's right. I'm not conducting the interview this time. I'm going to be the interviewee. So you'll get to hear a bit about me. I'm a proud Manx native. And in this episode, I'll tell you a bit about my own story, my childhood memories, relationships, my love for sport, which has been a significant part of my journey, as has music. From navigating a career in a male-dominated world to taking leaps of faith, I'll share with you a bit of the highs and lows that's shaped me into who I am today. So it's kind of a candid exploration of my life, but not forgetting the people who have helped me all the way, most of all my family and my business family at Thornton Chartered Financial Planners. But this episode isn't just about me. It's about the incredible stories we've shared on this podcast. From athletes to entrepreneurs, episodes are brimming with not just knowledge and inspiration, but genuine stories that will have you laughing one minute and perhaps shedding a tear the next. It's been a privilege for me to hear these stories and an absolute honour to share them with you. Looking ahead, I've got exciting plans for the future, not just involving bagpipes and greenhouses, but I do have an overarching deep passion for helping people. So here's to the next 100 episodes filled with more knowledge, inspiration and fun. Thank you so much for being part of the Island Influencers community. And I'm going to hand you over to Martin.
A very warm welcome to episode 100 of Island Influencers. This is not the voice you're expecting to hear, is it? This is not the dulcet tones of Sharon Sutton. This is Martin Bamford stepping into Sharon's shoes for episode 100 as the guest host. And I'm very pleased to welcome my guest for this episode, and that is Sharon Sutton. Hi, Sharon.
Hello. Hi, Martin. It's very surreal to be sat here and not in your seat, really, asking all the questions. So I must admit, I'm a little bit nervous as to answering and doing it from this side, because it is a bit different. But it's amazing what you get used to, isn't it, over time, is asking the questions. And when I remember starting this podcast, which is like 2000, right as COVID came out, and I was terribly nervous. You know, everybody that, you know, you wouldn't know when to jump in. You wouldn't know how much to say. And, you know, hopefully I'm getting better.
You are. I mean, I listen obviously to every episode. So for some context, I edit your episodes and work alongside with Catherine, who produces them. So I listen to every episode, and your progress over those 3 years or so and the past 100 episodes has been noticeable in a good way. So you're definitely getting better. I'll ask you at the end, though, whether it was easier to be in the guest chair or the host chair. And
okay.
Give us your sort of
yeah, I guess there'll be a lot of gaps to edit. But, you know, hey, thanks for doing this anyway. I do appreciate it.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So the interesting thing about hosting a podcast is, in many cases, the listeners don't get to know much about you as the host. I guess it would be quite useful to start with that introduction. You know, give you a potted history and tell us a bit about you and, I guess, professional and personal bio.
Oh, sure. Well, I am Manx born and bred, which is quite unusual these days, a bit of an ethnic minority. But I went to school in Ramsey Grammar. And so my mum and dad are both Manx, and my grandparents, 3 out of the 4 of them were Manx. And yeah, I went to Ramsey Grammar when I was 9, obviously not then. But when I was 9 years old, a major event happened for me, and that my parents divorced. Now, you know, anybody who's been through a family divorce, you know, it's the family that gets divorced, not the parents, just solely the parents. So we found, you know, my sister and I found that particularly tough. But, you know, that kind of gave us, I suppose, an attitude for life that actually, you know, you've got to keep busy, stay busy, work hard. And, you know, that sort of shaped my pathway from school. There was no question really of being able to go away to the UK to university, the only kind of pathway really available other than Isle of Man College. And back in those days, they didn't do degrees, and I wanted to be an architect. So I remember going to Dundee University for an interview, but realizing that actually it wasn't going to be achievable. So I sort of girded my loins and wrote a CV and hooked it round to the finance sector, which was just kind of starting to shape up, really. I mean, there'd always been a few banks on the island, but it wasn't regulated back in those days. So I applied to three banks, and I got all jobs, all three jobs, which I suppose, given that I was going to be a sixth former leaving, most of my sixth form chums, they all went to university, and the majority of them never came back, and that was kind of the brain drain back then. It was very unusual for people to get to that kind of sixth form level and not take it further. So I was able to get a job. I started to work at Barclays Bank, which was it was a real eye opener. I think that all of the learning that you do as a grown up happen when you go to work. You certainly don't learn it at school. I went from being a head girl at Ramsey Grammar to being the office junior at Ramsey, which meant doing a variety of tasks, including getting the girls shopping, taking the post, hand delivering much of it, and sweeping the safe. I think I got asked to do at one point. So I thought, right, I need to do something about this. And I'd wished that I had been able to make more of my full-time student role, which is something I'm constantly telling my son, you're a full-time sponsored student, make the most of it. Yeah, I got onto the course. There was a day release course for banking exams. So I got onto that, and it was sort of the start of the pathway, which eventually led many years later, because there was, as a woman in a bank, there were no senior managers that were women back then. I decided that I'd work my way up, said yes to every course that came along, eventually got the opportunity to be an IFA, an independent financial advisor for Barclays back in the day. And eventually, I suppose after 16 years, I ended up setting up my own business, but not after a kind of an odd exit, shall we say, from Barclays that was outsourced to a firm called Marsh that no longer is about from an IFA perspective. And then setting up Thornton. Yeah, so that's a story I probably won't go into. So
No. But you didn't have many female role models within the banking sector, but you had your mum, of course, and your mum was something of an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, Mum had a kindergarten from when my mum and dad were together in the basement of our house. She started a nursery school, and that was really something. She took on the idea, I think, from another small business that was running at the time. And she ran this for several years, and I still have contacts with people that went to my mum's nursery school, and quite often I'll meet people and say, "Oh, how's your mum?" So she was quite a character, but Mum didn't receive much of a formal education. She left school when she was 14. So when she when things started to change, when it got more regulated, like it does in everything, she struggled with a lot of the paperwork that was involved and under the regulation that came in. So I think that caused a bit of strain on my parents' marriage. And before you know it, that was just another reason that they got divorced. So that it closed down, sadly, and we had to move to a 1-bedroom flat until we got a commissioner's house. At that point, we moved into a rental property, and I remember I was 10, I think, when we moved in. And yeah, I suppose one of the things that there's nothing wrong with living in a commissioner's house. It's great if you're off that requirement at time. It's way above what you would normally have if you had no way of being able to afford to buy a house. So that's a powerful motivation for me to, having been there, to have to be in more control of my own financial destiny. So it was 2000 when Thornton opened its doors, and since then it was just I've been really lucky throughout my career to have had some amazing mentors in the business world, people to aspire to, yourself included, Martin, from the publications that you did very early on, and through our professional body, the Personal Finance Society, that formed a great part of my professional life as I got more and more established as a business owner.
Well, let's touch a bit on that, because you joined the PFS board, you became PFS president, you spearheaded some fantastic initiatives. I think there's a photo of you and I drifting around somewhere where I got my fellowship and went up on stage for the graduation ceremony, and you handed me the scroll.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll dig that out at some point. But
oh, great!
What motivated you to get involved in our professional body, and not just get involved, but take such an important role within that body?
Well, it's so it goes to the very heart of why I suppose I do what I do, which is to genuinely help people with this big conundrum that they have, which is managing their money, because it's a massive responsibility, isn't it? And yet many of us leave school with no qualifications, no instruction in the how-to of money, and yet it surrounds us. It influences every decision we make, pretty much. Where we live, where we send our kids to school, what we eat, where we eat out, if we can afford to eat out. That was really something that I discovered early on, that I was going to get real fulfillment out of helping people. So I suppose the Personal Finance Society really gave me that framework in which to get as qualified as I possibly could to demonstrate to people that I knew what I was talking about. Because I think there's still, in the back of my brain, there's still the, to be thought of as equal to. There's a saying, isn't there? In order to be thought of as half as good as your male counterparts, you have to be twice as qualified. And so I kind of took that to heart, really. And, I realized that the level of qualification that we had to hurdle in order to be able to advise people on their life savings. It's a huge responsibility, and I felt I ought to be in the most informed place I could in order to do the best that I could for them. That's led me to eventually getting to be a chartered financial planner, and proudly to say that I was the first ever chartered financial planner in the Isle of Man. And so I thought, well, that makes me something. So I thought I'll go to the annual conference in London. So off I went. And in those days, the AGM of the Personal Finance Society was part of the annual conference. So I went to it, and Faye Goddard was the CEO back then. You'll remember Faye. And she says, right, has anybody got any other business? So I sort of had been thinking, well, I need to ask a question here, because every time I wanted to go to one of the CPD sessions, continuing professional development, I had to go to Haydock Park, which is a flight or a boat journey away. And in winter, I think I'd probably take my chances with the flight, actually. But, hang the cost. So it was just a question. Look, can you do anything for us in the Isle of Man? There's plenty of IFAs over there. We would really value, I'm speaking for myself, we'd really value some quality CPD. And, you could almost hear people squirming at home. No. So Faye said, oh yeah, let's have a look. We got some members. Let's set up a region in the Isle of Man. Let's make it 23 regions or something. You'll run it, won't you? Okay. And, that was a massive leap of faith, because when you advise people on a day-to-day basis and you speak in public, your comfort zone is speaking to one or two people, a couple or an individual. Now, for me to go and address my peers, that speaking to a room full of people who don't want to be there, maybe, because they've got this event on. Well, actually, that was quite nerve-wracking for me. Yeah, I did that for a while. And at some point, someone said, oh, she'd be quite good on the board in London. So I was asked to go along, have an interview. So I actually got the job. I didn't realize it was a job application at the time. It was. So I joined the board in 2012. And at that point, I just stepped down from doing another voluntary role with the Isle of Man Sports Council, which is now Isle of Man Sport. And that's, I'd learned a lot from that. So I was able to add somewhat of the workings of a board and my experience there to that, although obviously a completely different field. So that gave me a huge feeling of fulfillment to be able to shape the profession at that level and to lead it. Well, that was amazing. I ended up speaking to about 1,000 people at the NEC in Birmingham, which was our annual conference then. The biggest ever was the Festival of Financial Planning, which was a real amazing event. And we launched the financial planning panel at the time, the Power Panel, which it became. That was amazing to be part of that. And the best part about it is, I suppose, all the great people that you meet along the way that influence your thinking, that help you build your business and your team and everything around you in order to make it the best it can possibly be.
Yeah,
So I suppose that's why.
without a doubt. And you touched then on the Isle of Man Sports Council, and your role there was the result of what was happening to you back in 2002 in Manchester. So let's time travel a little bit and jump around a bit. I'm going to take you all the way back there, Sharon. So on the start line of the road race in 2002, tell me about that.
Well, I've always been really, really lucky to be sporty. I guess goes back to those days where you've got to try hard, work hard, but have fun doing it. And sport was a great love of mine. And my sister and I used to laugh because she'd give me stick because she said, if at first you don't succeed, Sharon, change your sport. Because at that point I'd gone from athletics to hockey to long distance running to cycling to triathlon and then to cycling. But it was always something that you had to work hard at in order to get anywhere. So I ended up finding myself after taking to cycling fairly late. I was 27 when I got my first proper bike and did a 10-mile time trial. And I had some brilliant people to cycle with. It turns out that women, when they take up cycling, are a really good match for men veterans, because there's very few women, or there were back in those days, to cycle with. So I used to do all my training with vets, men. So like the likes of, you won't know these names, but Mike Williams, Lionel Cowan, Nick Corkle, some really great stalwarts of our community who would just give me endless tips and on what to do, how to train. And eventually I got helped by an ex-professional road racer, a guy called Rob Holden, who used to ride for the Motorola team and now lives in the Isle of Man. In fact, his daughter is Lizzie Holden and she rides for the UAE women's team, professional team. Anyway, Rob was my coach for a couple of seasons. And my goodness, when somebody who knows what they're doing tells you what to do and how to do it, what a difference. It was eye-opening to me. It sort of professionalized it. So yeah, I got on the start line of the women's road race. Unfortunately for me, a very hilly race around Rivington in just north of Manchester, near Bolton Football Stadium. And oh gosh, I'm no mountain goat. My teammate was, but I certainly wasn't a mountain goat. So most people don't realize how a bike race works, or maybe they do now. It's more mainstream than it was. But I deliberately rode on the front for the first 3 laps when there was no pace at all, really, just to get on the front, show my jersey, and because so my mum could tell the world that I was leading the Isle of Man Commonwealth Games. I was leading the Commonwealth Games road race for the Isle of Man. And of course, as soon as the pace went up, I went off the back, and I did finish. But yeah, and I suppose for me a pivotal moment of thinking was, and I was very nervous about the whole thing, about being on the start line. It was, really quite stressful. And then I reasoned to myself that, I was sat on the start line here with the girl from Jersey and the other girl from the Isle of Man, Jackie Fletcher. And we were the only 3 amateurs in that field. Everybody else was a pro bike racer already, even in 2002. Nicole Cook, for example, she went on and won it. She went on to win not just the Commonwealth, but she went on to win the World Championships and the Olympics in Beijing. So I realized that, here am I racing with these girls, and they're in their office today. They're on their bikes. Now in my office, like you, I've got a computer and I've got a telephone on my desk. So, this is, okay, it's a good level for a hobby, but it is just a hobby. And I kind of went back and got a bit serious about my profession then, and did a lot more exams. But yeah, I was already serving on the Isle of Man Sports Council at that point, and that's a great organisation. It's still in existence today. It's government funded, and I think there was a grant from there was a philanthropist a few years ago that left money to it. So that still provides quite a lot of bursaries. And Mark Cavendish himself provides bursaries to up and coming promising cyclists. And so we were able to, from grassroots to elite level, be able to support a whole range of sports. And I was part of the sports council that came up with their Isle of Man sports strategy that was able to put together an actual plan. So we avoided spreading what little money we had, a mile wide and an inch deep. It really needed to focus on key sports that mattered. And I think they're still following something like that today, but it's been more than 10 years since I stepped down.
Yeah, I mean, you keep your toe in the water in a sense, because I know you sponsor and support some fantastic young athletes.
Yeah, well, I remember how, for me, who had a job and a business, how expensive it was to get off the island, to get over the moat and to be able to go and compete on a national level, let alone international level. So, yeah, we help youngsters who, don't have jobs yet, who show promise and commitment and joy in what they do.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. Tell me a bit about life on the Isle of Man. I mean, your listeners, your Isle of Man resident listeners will already know this stuff, but those of us that haven't had the pleasure of visiting the island, and I must do at some point because my aunt lives there and she keeps
saying, you've told me.
have to visit at some point. But yeah, what is the Isle of Man like in 2023? And obviously you've seen it change over the years as well.
It's still got a fair amount of growth going on. You can still see plenty of activity in the property market, which is always a good barometer of how we're doing. Infrastructure wise, it's like any part of the UK that's, loads of roads and, limited resources, I suppose, to keep them going, apart from the TT course. That's kept in pretty good nick. But, if you're a cyclist, you tend to notice the roads. But no, it's if you have young kids, it's a brilliant place to have your children, certainly in all the primary schools are excellent. There's a good range of secondary schools. The teacher to the pupil ratio isn't too high. Part of the UK system, GCSEs, A levels, or international baccalaureate, or I think even the they do foundation courses at the college, so you can do BTEC or whatever it's called these days. I'm sorry, I'm not really up to that, but up to speed on that. I probably should have a guest from Isle of Man College on my podcast next, shouldn't I? Yeah, so there's plenty. There's plenty of positives about the place. Obviously, for a sport, the island definitely punches above its weight, and in most things, really, it's all you have to do is look at the other episodes that I've done, and just see that the amount of quality and people with a real passion and so bright. And when I was part of the Personal Finance Society, right, for me, biggest driver of that was that the main goal is to represent consumers, to make sure that they have confidence and trust in the profession. So when I stepped down from the professional body, I thought, well, actually, we all know that the negative voices are fewer, but the loudest. So what if I can give some sort of voice, platform to the positive majority and magnify those who will speak? Because usually people are quite shy in promoting themselves and the good that they're doing. So what if I can do that? And by doing that, I create more confidence and trust in the Isle of Man so that it makes it more attractive as a place to want to be, whether to stay here, to move to here, whether to come on holiday here, to invest here, what if? So that was the whole aim, and it remains the aim, to be perfectly honest. So the Isle of Man as a place to live, it's like a mixture of the nicest beach in the UK that you can think of and the Lake District, but with wider roads. And it's easier to get around here than it is the Lake District. Just saying.
There you go. You sold it. You should be Isle of Man Tourism next. That's the next voluntary role you can step into.
No, radio. I'll go on radio.
Absolutely. So I mean, Island Influencers, this is episode 100. Most podcasts, I don't think, get past episode 5 or 6. So you've done incredibly well to sustain that many episodes and to keep finding so many interesting voices and people to speak to. I mean, talk us through, and as a podcaster myself, I have an insight into this, but talk us through what you think about when you're approaching potential guests, who you'd like to speak to, maybe some of your dream guests for the future, people you haven't quite managed to pin down.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So the dream guests, I'd still like to interview Mark Cavendish, obviously, Peter Kenyock, obviously, both cyclists, for those of you who are not cyclists and have lived under a rock. Sam Barks, who's just had a baby, and whose dad I was in the pipe band with, so I know a dad. But it's a really small community, and I do get I get people suggested to me by other guests, but also by the public. It's amazing the reach of it. You'll have seen the statistics like me. Is just to it's overwhelming for me that so many people have listened to an episode, or at least an episode. And I mean, I'm always open to suggestions. I've got a few people in the pipeline, which I'm very excited about. But yeah, there's there's no end of talent here. You know, I could have just done just a sporting podcast and I'd be on episode 100. You know what I mean? It's frightening, the talent that we do have here.
So reflecting on those first 100 episodes, you know, what are some of the key moments for you? Which were ones that sort of really made you sit up in your seat and think, my goodness?
Just how everybody kind of, they reflect, I suppose the main passion is they're doing what they do because they love what they're doing. And they've all realized along the way, and this is a message for anybody at any stage of their career. If you don't love what you're doing, why are you doing it? You know, life's too short. If you have the choice, if you can make the choice, if you can be brave, do that. Don't do this. You know, carry on and do what you want to do. Do what, because you'll be much better at it. You'll be much happier. And work shouldn't just be the rent that you pay on life. It should be there to inspire you, to make you grow in your life. I think
that's a really important message, and and getting that message across through the conversations you're having, I think, is such a powerful medium as well. I mean, you're not just telling the world that, you're hearing it from so many different places.
For sure, every single one of them, and I learned something from every single one. And I couldn't even begin to tell you the best things that I've heard. But at some point, we will put together some sort of publication that will reflect, 10 things island influencers think about opportunities, 10 things island influencers think about leadership, 10 things, business tips from island influencers, the top 10 tips, those sorts of things. But, ultimately there are stories there, wonderful, heartfelt stories that would make you cry. And some people have come from such humble backgrounds in order to be able to tell their story. Yeah, it's a real privilege to have that insight and for people to be generous enough to want to share their story. That's something that I will never take for granted and always be thankful for.
So I've got the benefit here, Sharon, of having some of your sort of standard questions that you tend to ask guests, so I can put you in the hot seat a little bit and make you squirm just a little. One of them you ask is, what's planned next? And this doesn't just have to be about business. This can be about, a personal perspective too. What's coming down the pipeline?
Wow. Interesting. So 40 years ago, next year, the most noisy thing I've ever done is start a pipe band. And I went to Lorient quite a few times because I used to play, I still do play, but not as much, flute and tin whistle for the Manx dancers. And when you go to Lorient, the Festival Interceltique de Lorient, they have this major parade. And a tin whistle and a mandolin, which my friend played, they just wasn't going to cut it with, I think there were 73 pipe bands that day. So there's a massive bagpipe culture in Brittany, along with 3 bands from Northern Ireland, 3 bands from Scotland, and me with my penny whistle and my friend with a mandolin. I thought, if you can't beat them, join them. So when I got home, it was the following year I left school. I got a job in Barclays Bank. First thing, I applied for a bank loan, set of bagpipes. We did some fundraising. I put an advert in the paper and I had an amazing response, both from wannabe sponsors and people who'd been in a band prior to 1939. A really a lovely old guy called Jack Cunningham, who used to be in the original Scout band that was disbanded at the start of Second World War, never reformed. We had bits and pieces of pipes from there. And of course, existing pipers who just happened to live in the Isle of Man, one of them a coach driver. And then there was other drummers that came out of the woodwork. So we formed this band eventually in 1984. It took a few years to get off the ground. And so I left when I had my son. He's now 16. So I've gone back to band recently and sort of starting to get back into that. And so we're going to do a 40th anniversary event, I believe, next year. So we'll see how that goes. But that's sort of on the cards. I have a garden. I've got a greenhouse. I'd love to grow more stuff. I'm still going to do this. I love podcasting. And, at some point I will recruit a successor for Thornton because, everybody should have a good succession strategy. But I still love what I do. So I will remain, I hope to, please God, with in some sort of advisory capacity, financial planning, helping people. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yep. Any books you've read recently? Any podcasts, other podcasts you listen to? What's been inspiring you of late?
I love the Rest is Politics podcast. They did an episode just with Mark Carney, ex-governor of the Bank of England. Brilliant. And they also did one with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I really loved. And that made me go and watch his Netflix 3-part documentary, which was eye-opening, brilliant. Anybody who's a fan of Terminator. That was very good. I listened to The Rest is Money, which is relatively new, with Steph McGovern and Robert Peston. I think that's really good. And for advisors, or even for consumers who are money related, how to, there's probably Humans Under Management, Andy Hart, but The Trap. Do you listen to The Trap? Real Pile of Trap.
I've heard good things about it.
It's hysterical.
It's my list yet.
Yeah, the Real Advisor podcast. That is so funny, and it's so good. They cover a huge range of topics. I mean, I'm howling with it, but it's a bit male, pale and stale. Let's say that. But it's they do bring all the topics to light and disagree with each other all the time, but giving some very different and important points of view. So that's worth a listen. I read a blog called The Wealth of Common Sense. Have you come across that with Ben Carlson? He's a US CFP.
I've heard of Ben, but I've not seen the blog. No.
Oh, brilliant. It's great CPD for us, but it's like 2 minutes on a particular topic that, any lay person who wants to know a little bit about why they shouldn't panic. That's a really good education to start with, I think. And then books and stuff, I suppose. I've got a Kindle now, which I do not read anything at all that's going to wake me up when I read at night. I don't want that. I want to go to sleep. So I read any old garbage at night, really. But if I'm reading something to learn, I'll read something like I've enjoyed Matthew Syed's books, Black Box Thinking. They're good. I like Carl Richards' The One-Page Financial Plan, and a really good read, which I've just sent this to my dad, The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Yes. So good, so inspirational. So about old age, which we're all heading to, if we're spared. Yeah.
Well, look, I'll collate those podcasts and books and make sure we pop them in the show notes, so listeners.
Thank you.
And you always ask guests and sort of put them on the spot a bit by saying, what's your favourite quote? Is there a quote that you hold on to, something that inspires you, that goes through your head as you have those conversations?
When in 2021, I did an intensive coaching course with Tina Weeks, who we both know.
Yes.
And her course was called Know Thyself, which is a Socrates quote, because it all starts with you and what you think and what your view of the world is, what you make up about it. So know thyself means that there is what happens, right? And there's what we make it mean. In its simplest, most profound part, that's what it is. And so it's, how do you understand what you're doing? How do you understand what you're making up? And how do you deal with things better? So that was profound for me to do that, to realize all the hang-ups, all the things I'd made up about myself in the past from my childhood, brought forward. And, instead of being my own worst enemy, I became my own number one fan. I stopped giving myself such a hard time. It probably hasn't done my fitness goals any good because I stopped beating myself up so much. But, I enjoy things. I take things much more calmly now. I'm not so determined to push on, all the time. It's just learning to be and be happy. And that was profound for me. Now, Aristotle, he was a good one. He said, we are what we repeatedly do. So excellence then is not an act. I saw that on the wall of my dentist. I thought, that's really good. I like that. And it's actually, we can take that from what we do in our lives, can't we? It's apply to everything really. But Tina also said it's easier to do nothing, but it makes it worse in the end. So it's harder to do something, but at the end it makes it better. So it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, really, isn't it? Keep busy, get doing stuff. Yeah.
You won't get any arguments from me about that. Philosophy on life.
Yeah.
Sharon, it's been an absolute pleasure to turn the tables on your interview for episode 100 of Island Influencers. I promised at the start I'd ask, was that easier being the guest, or was it easier being the host?
Gosh, I had to think a lot harder. It's so much easier to listen. but then to ask good questions and to, which you do great because you've done this for a long time. How many episodes have you with your podcast now?
I think I'm up to about 500 or so.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Brilliant. Well done.
Thank you very much. Well done, you. I mean, seriously, congratulations. It is a milestone.
No, thank you, and thanks for your help at the beginning. With I think you've still got a blog somewhere, haven't you, to tell people what sort of equipment you need if you're going to set up and do your podcast.
It's out there somewhere, yeah. Got to make it sound good. Absolutely, Sharon. Thank you for
thanks very much, Martin.
Thanks for this episode, and
thank you so much.
Thanks to all the listeners.
Thank you. Thanks for listening this far. I hope you found this episode to be valuable. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favour. Would you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the best ways for others to find the series, and please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who know they'll find it helpful. That way we can spread the word about how great a place the Isle of Man is to live and work, and help spread some positivity. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our great community. I'll see you next time. Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer Catherine Watts from Social Cues and editor Martin Bamford at Bear Content, and thank you for listening.